We've lost 73% average species size across all wildlife populations in the last 50 years. So that's in my lifetime that we've seen that happen. When you look at certain sectors, like freshwater species, that's fallen by more than 80%.
So this is Claudia Klingelhofer for ISPO. We're talking about sustainable challenges, and today with me is Dan Yates from EOCA. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
So maybe you could tell us a bit about what EOCA is and who you are.
So EOCA is a membership organization for the outdoor industry. We take memberships from our paying members, which is a sliding scale based on turnover. So we have big members and small members. And we use that money to invest in nature restoration, biodiversity, wild places, in a way that pays back any impact that the outdoor industry has through their production, but also associates and understands the necessity of protecting wild places and impact for the success of the outdoor industry going into the future.
Maybe you can introduce yourself a bit just in a few sentences.
Yeah, so I'm relatively new to working in the outdoor industry. I come from an athlete background. I used to be a whitewater kayaker. I actually trained in healthcare. I was an optometrist. But I transitioned from a kind of an athlete who was spending his time like paddling rivers in wilderness areas around the world and just gradually seeing the increased destruction I was seeing. Seeing these rivers being lost and not being able to anybody see them again, mostly due to construction or man-made development there. And I transitioned into an environmental activist, I suppose. I founded a couple of NGOs and worked on river protection from development. After that, I started working in climate. I was the director of partnerships and initiatives at a European level for Protect Our Winters. And I just started as the executive director for EOCA to enact their step change, making EOCA ready for the next stage that the outdoor industry requires and our planet requires.
Okay, that's interesting because maybe that's something that we have to explain as well. EOCA is about that biodiversity. Why is biodiversity so important?
Yeah, so a lot of the focus at the moment or in recent years has always been on climate, but interlinked with and associated to, unextractably, if that's a word, is the biodiversity and nature crisis. We've lost 73% average species size across all wildlife populations in the last 50 years. So that's in my lifetime we've seen that happen. When you look at certain sectors like freshwater species, that's fallen by more than 80%. So we've lost 75% of the animals that we have, animals, plants, insects that we have on this planet in 50 years. It doesn't matter how effectively we tackle the climate crisis. If we don't in tandem tackle nature and biodiversity, we're going to lose the natural processes and natural resources that we require for the creating of our products, for our user group to go out and have somewhere to use our products, and for the health and well-being, mental well-being of our population and our consumer group, and even just for clean food, clean water, food, clean air, and everything that's required for a livable planet. So,
wow, that's devastating. These are numbers, to be honest. So tell us maybe a bit more about what we can do actually against it. Not referring to EOCA, but in general.
In general, what we need to look at is the primary drivers of the biodiversity crisis. And they are land use change is the number one. So that is transitioning of land for where it has intact natural processes. So a functioning ecosystem has intact natural processes. So rivers that are allowed to meander, transport sediment, change their bank structures, trees that are allowed to grow and natural trees, the right species of trees that are allowed to grow in natural areas. Biodiversity, where we don't have monocultures, where we have a diverse range of species, and where those species exist in a way where they're not reliant on management by man, where they're governed by their own natural processes, where they can create self-sustaining and flourishing ecosystems. That is what we need. And the first thing we need to do about that is land use change. That's the big thing. Stop converting land from wild places to others. The next one is direct exploitation of species. Direct exploitation of species is everything from overfishing to cutting down of primary forest, deforestation. Huge thing in the supply chain of the outdoor industry. The next one is climate change. We need to sort out our carbon emissions because that is linked to the biodiversity crisis. The next one is pollution. So are we polluting? We need to be looking at the chemicals that we're using in our products, in our supply chain, the pollution that we're creating there. And the final one is invasive species. So are we introducing invasive species to places that shouldn't exist? I mean, and it's established now, and there's great benefits of merino wool, but sheep to New Zealand is an invasive species that has had a negative environmental impact. Those are the 5 key drivers of the biodiversity and nature process.
Oh, wow. That's quite a lot. So maybe with EOCA, where are the levers you can pull on?
So with EOCA, we have 3 pillars of action now. The first one has been always done by EOCA. EOCA is actually 20 years old now. And its core purpose up till this point has been environmental granting. Granting of NGOs to go out, get their hands dirty and restore the wild places where either the outdoor consumer goes, the Alps, the ocean, Europe, or in producer countries, Southeast Asia, or in countries that are overly impacted due to the habits of us in the north. We have loads of projects in South Africa, for instance, in Africa. So funding conservation work, funding nature restoration work, that's always been a core pillar, and providing the reporting criteria for that. The next pillar that I'll be bringing in as part of my role as creating step change is becoming the environmental advocacy, the nature and biodiversity advocacy voice at a Brussels level for the outdoor industry. How do we take that amazing work that we've done for environmental granting funded by the outdoor industry, take that to Brussels and go, we're debating this point of legislation now. The outdoor industry wants to have its say. It is worth this much money. It is a business voice. It has committed this much to nature conservation through EOCA, so it has a credible voice. Now we need you to consider our views when you're debating policy. We cannot allow policy development to be guided purely by the huge people who have public affairs now. Fast fashion industry, the automotive industry, the chemical industry. These people are in Brussels and they're talking to decision makers and they're steering policy. EOCA will bring the outdoor industry together and bring that voice on nature and biodiversity. Very much like EOG will come together and bring that voice on sustainability, and alongside organizations like FESI. And then our third thing is we are looking at changing legislation when it comes to how we protect biodiversity. There's going to be an increasing requirement for businesses to show the impact on biodiversity that they have, but also the risks and exposure they have to a loss of biodiversity in nature. And therefore, there are a requirement to finance nature restoration, nature actions which are positive rather than negative, in order to offset that or mitigate that risk that you have. That's ongoing legislation. So we'll be working at developing, putting the outdoor industry's viewpoint into that, our members' viewpoint into that, to steer that legislation so it's fit for the outdoor industry. We want to make sure if there is a nature credit, biodiversity credit coming through legislation, which looks like it could be likely, and when the outdoor industry comes into scope, what we don't want it to do is go the same way as carbon credits, where you're seeing huge commercial providers selling off portions of a South American forest where it has no connection in value chain to the outdoor industry. We want to be able to create nature positive actions that are connected to the value chain of the industry, whether that is the landscapes that your consumer associates with, the countries that you produce in, or the areas that your equipment use. We want to bring a nature credit or biodiversity credit, if that's the way the legislation goes, in a way that it works for the outdoor industry.
So let's dive a bit deeper into the part of brand partnerships. If a brand is interested in partnering with you, which are the different ways they can partner with you?
Yeah, so we have 3 layers of partnerships with brands. First of all, you just join as a member. Everybody joins as a member, first of all. Membership funds our conservation work, our environmental granting, our advocacy work, our keeping up to date with legislation. It funds those 3 pillars that what EOCA does. Your cost to join as a brand is linked to your European term. So it doesn't matter how small you are, if you're a one-man band or a startup, or if you're the North Face or the Patagonia, they're also members of EOCA. So you have a sliding scale based on turnover. One of the key things that you get to do with that is we pool that money and use that for our core conservation grant or environmental grant projects. We have just opened our environmental granting round now. We have 230 applications from around the world. We'll make a short list of 10 to 20 of those that are the most appropriate, and then our membership will vote on which ones they want to fund. We also do a vote for the public, for the consumers to vote on which one they want to. That's your basic membership. The more exciting levels get above. So Summit membership is where a brand can really get involved. So Summit membership is where we partner one brand with one conservation project or one environmental project. And that's where a brand can really get connected, can use that nature conservation or restoration project to drive storytelling and marketing and consumer engagement. It can use it to create culture change within their staff by getting them involved, hands-on. You can do it as part of your sort of ESG, financial reporting that you've invested in this. We've got some great examples of this. For instance, Pomica, who make skins for ski touring, in Scandinavia. They directly fund a project that is involved in the ringing and protection of seals, and that's something that they're really committed to do, and they've done that on a multi-year basis. We had once a few years ago, RAB equipment got involved with a project that was protecting snow leopards in the high mountain areas. Really connected with their brand as a high mountain brand, but also with biodiversity there. They got their members of staff out there to get involved, and it really drove like connection of their community with that project, but also their staff and their company culture. And then finally, we have our sustaining members. They're the ones that help us grow. Sustaining members just fund the increased reach of EOCA, our advocacy development policy, and things like that. So 3 different ways to get involved, all equally as important as each other.
In case if I'm a employee at a brand and I want to convince my leadership board, so how could I do that? Is there any advice you have?
I think it depends on your role in the brand. Like if you work in CSR, you need to be talking to the people who decide this budget about the impacts on biodiversity that you're having and should be recording, your risk and exposure to nature and biodiversity loss. And that's why your brand needs to be stepping in and like making mitigation in terms of positive action. If you're for the marketing department, you need to remind your brand that actually, when you look at research now among sustainability, it's something like 36% of people care about biodiversity as part of that, and that's where that amazing research that's just been from above the clouds it's been saying. So there's core reasons in terms of your outreach to consumers, but also your financial risks as well. So I suppose it depends where on you're in the company, but those are the 2 different levers that you should be pointing.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, and how do you help? Do you also consult for companies or brands?
So what we'll be doing, I mean, the way that we help in terms of support is our brands that want to become summit members and really engage in environmental projects. That's really difficult to do actually, but we have professional conservation officers that work with us. So we handle, if you're a high mountain brand and you want a project that can connect to the high mountains, or say you're a brand that manufactures in Vietnam and you want to offset your biodiversity impact in Vietnam, what we will do is we can bring you a range of curated projects that we've worked with in the past or that we've passed through our due diligence process. We can connect you with those NGOs. We then also monitor the projects. We set really strict reporting criteria. So we have an interim and an end-term report to make sure you're getting your impact from the money. So as a brand, you don't have to worry about, is your money being spent well? We'll handle all of that impact reporting with the professional staff that we have. In terms of advocacy, when we're showing up at Brussels, not every brand is big enough to have its own public affairs team. It's an expensive thing, or its own public affairs consultancy. So we'll be working on developing that advocacy strategy going forward and bringing you in as part of that. You don't need to spend your time researching which MEP is working on which paper or which commissioner you need to reach out to about which topic. That's and the political timetable going forward. So that's something that we'll be able to provide advice on. And then again, our members will keep them informed with the upcoming legislation around that kind of CSRD or TNFD, like biodiversity credits and things that are coming. We'll make sure our membership is up to date on that too.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, those biodiversity credits. Tell us a bit more about it. I mean, there aren't some at the moment, but what do you know, what might come next?
Well, one thing that's happening at the moment, and we're seeing this, we see this in the UK where I'm from, but we're also seeing it in other countries too, where currently biodiversity net gain is something that's used in development. So if you build a factory on a forest and you cut down all the trees, you then need to, if you cannot, mitigate that at source, you then have to provide an uplift in biodiversity at an external site. So the idea is that you increase biodiversity in one place, one physical location, to deal with the biodiversity damage that you've caused in another location. There is a feeling that will be coming into, for instance, product manufacture. The impact of your biodiversity there, you can offset with a positive biodiversity increase elsewhere. Our concern at EOCA is not whether this is coming or not. We're unlikely to have an influence on that. Is that when it does come, that we can have an influence and make it fit for purpose. What we don't want to see is it go the same way as the carbon credit market, where you're seeing like huge commercial entities investing in meaningless carbon credits. We want to make sure that we're providing a raft of solutions, biodiversity, nature restoration projects, wild place projects that are connected to your value chain. So not only are they ticking the box that you need for your offset, but also that they're connected with your community, they're making a real difference, that they're properly monitored, and that's something that you can get your staff out to see and involve and create culture change in your company as well.
Yeah, you're talking about the stuff. That's an important point, I think, because if you engage in biodiversity somehow, it's also must be very motivating for the company itself, right? For the employees.
Yeah, and I think I've come from a background of working on climate actually recently, and to me, biodiversity, nature, wild place protection is much more tangible. Like it's much easier to get passionate about protecting a place or restoring a place, and you can actually take your staff there to see it, to feel it, to touch it. Your consumer can go there and like partake in that place, experience that place. I think it builds nature connection, which is really missing. Some of the projects that we grant involve volunteer workforces, and it's really been shown that nature connection grows when you take positive actions in the outdoors to restore the outdoors. So I think that that's a way that you can get your company culture really engaged in making a positive difference through nature and biodiversity. It's a real tangible thing that you can touch, you can feel, you can smell. Ride your bike through or cycle through, walk through or ride your snowboard down.
Yeah. Have you an example what you can refer?
In terms of getting involved, hands-on. I'd love the rabbit example where they got their staff out and monitoring the snow leopards. We did a panel today with an organization called Patron that organize removing plastic waste from the mountains. They have staff days for certain companies where we can go out and engage. We have a great project where one of our brands worked at wild meadow restoration in Ukraine, and they got to go out, visit those meadows, engage with the communities that are there, and help sort of understand and measure themselves the impact of the biodiversity positivity that they created. They got to take that hands-on. And then tragically, after the war started, that company has stayed engaged with the community there and has helped the community with aid and things since then. So it's actually built a connection, not just with nature, but with the community where that project has taken place, which has continued beyond the lifetime of the project.
Wow, that's amazing. So you talked about it's an organization for outdoor brands. I mean, could you define it a bit more? If I'm a bike brand, if I'm a snowboarding brand?
Yeah, we're pretty broad. So we work with European brands. So any company that partakes in activities within Europe, and we mean continental Europe, not the EU. So you're for an American brand that sells into Europe. But anything that is involved in the outdoor activity world. So we have tour operators, we have individual mountain guides that join up as members. We have huge, apparel companies. So anyone that is involved in the outdoor kind of activity sector, outdoor leisure sector, outdoor recreation sector, I don't know what you want to call it. It doesn't matter in what sector. If you have operations or sales within Europe, you can work with EOCA.
Okay, and where do I get in touch with you?
So you can get in touch with us at our website, eocaconservation.org. All the details on how you join as a member there. As I said, there's these different ways to get involved. Our summit membership, where we really connect you to specific projects. There's you can become a sustaining member, work with us on our advocacy programs and stuff like that. But step number one is just join up as a member normally, and then get involved that way. And then we'll reach, we can always happy if you've got any questions before you join up, particularly for a bigger brand and it's a more expensive thing. Let's have a call, happy to have a personal meet or a Teams call or anything before they join.
Nice, really nice. So to come to the end I see so much positivity in the things you're saying and the action you're taking. Can you tell us a bit more? How does it come from, and what do you recommend to keep this positivity when it's getting tough and you're reading about all this decline in biodiversity?
This is always a tough one, and actually, so I've worked in the NGO sector as a direct activist, as a river conservation person, as an environmental spokesperson on climate with POW and now biodiversity here. And actually what we're seeing a lot is, they call it sort of eco-anxiety amongst younger people who are really struggling to wrap their head around the scale of the problem. It's like that. It's very difficult to do. I think our resilience as outdoor sports people or outdoor lovers, we know we have to keep walking to get to the top of the hill, and we can't just sit down. And sometimes the bike ride is a little bit longer and a little bit sweatier than we thought it was going to be. But if we can dig into that passion and that resilience that we have as outdoor sports people or outdoor lovers, and we can transfer that to the passion that we have for protecting these places, I think that's a good way to start.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely picture. Thanks, Dan.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
So thanks for listening, and I hope you liked what you see. And if so, leave a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel and visit us on ispo.com or check out the Instagram ISPO Accelerating Sports.